Nobody believed the rancher until 5 widow women appeared at midnight. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. On a blood-red night in the Wild West, a man everyone called Mad heard a knock that would shatter his world. 5 widows long thought lost to war stood in the moonlight, their eyes burning with secrets. What they wanted, and what he became, would haunt an entire land forever. The desert whispers tonight, and no one knows where it comes from. The western night was suffocatingly cold. The sky was pitch black. A crescent moon hung suspended like a sharpened silver blade, ready to cut into the darkness. Wind howled through the barren canyons, carrying with it a chilling wail, as if hundreds of wandering souls could not find rest. In the midst of that silence, a worn-down wooden house stood alone on the prairie. The roof tiles had rotted, the windows creaked with every sweep of the wind. It was where the rancher had lived alone for years. Folks said that in that house, a dim light flickered through the night and never went out, as though its owner feared the darkness might swallow him whole. At times, travelers passing by the ranch at night claimed to hear strange sounds. Some swore it was weeping, others whispered it was a woman's murmur. But no one dared linger long enough to find out. They only knew one thing: something was not right there. The rancher still sat at his cracked wooden table, clutching a glass of cheap whiskey. His eyes, weary yet unblinking, stayed fixed on the door. Outside, the wind wailed, and a faint voice seemed to echo, "We will return at midnight." The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Cold sweat trickled down his back. The whole village called him mad, until they saw those eyes. In the small village not far from the ranch, tales of the rancher were always told as jokes around the fire. People recounted how he once screamed in the marketplace, warning of the widow's shadows that appeared in the night. "He's lost his mind," an old cowboy spat on the ground with a sneer. "That man's got nothing but liquor in his veins," a woman muttered while clutching her child, as though speaking of a plague. No one believed him, not a soul. To the village, the rancher was cursed, an outcast trapped in his own fear. Children passing by his ranch hurled stones before running off in fits of laughter. Adults either shook their heads in pity or avoided him with disdain, as if keeping their distance from disease. But there was one thing no one dared deny: the eyes of the rancher. They were not the eyes of a drunkard, nor the eyes of a liar. They were the eyes of someone who had seen something others could not or would not believe. And those eyes made some shiver, even under the blazing noon sun of the Wild West. That night, when he returned to his lonely wooden house, the desert wind howled again. Within its breath, a whisper echoed, clearer than ever before. "Tonight will not be the same." The rancher gripped the gun on the table. His chest rose and fell, torn between fear and the sense that he had been waiting for this moment all along. The sky burned red like blood, a sign the nightmare had returned. That evening, dusk fell strangely fast. The sun sank beyond the horizon, yet instead of a gentle orange glow, the heavens bled into streaks of watery crimson. Clouds gathered, swirling into circles, like the gaze of a colossal eye watching over the prairie. The rancher stood on his porch, clutching his ragged old cowboy hat, eyes fixed on that uncanny sky. His heart pounded as memories surged back. Years ago, beneath the same blood-red heavens, it had all begun. From the distance, the horses in the corral suddenly shrieked, hooves thrashing wildly as they smashed through the wooden rails and bolted into the desert. The hunting dogs howled long and low, tails tucked, before vanishing into the night, abandoning their master. It was as if all of nature was fleeing from something drawing near. The wind rose, whipping sand against his face, and within the shrill gusts, the rancher heard it again, the familiar voice, now so clear it could not be denied. "We made a pact, and at midnight we shall come." His hand trembled, his throat was parched. He turned inside and lit another oil lamp. The wavering flame flickered against the stained walls, casting warped, shifting shadows. Outside, the sky still bled red, like a wound refusing to heal. And in that half-light, 5 figures seemed to linger at the edge of the prairie, motionless. 3 knocks at midnight changed the fate of a man. That night, the clock hands froze just before 12. The silence around the ranch was so absolute that the rancher's heartbeat seemed to echo through the wooden room. He sat motionless, gun resting on the table, eyes fixed on the front door. The oil lamp flickered, its murky yellow light stretching his shadow long across the wall. Each passing minute dragged on like a century. Then, knock, knock, knock. The sound rang out, slow and heavy. 3 beats, steady as the heartbeat of a dying man. The rancher shot to his feet, chest tightening. His trembling hand gripped the gun. He drew a deep breath, but his throat clenched as though strangled by unseen hands. A second time, knock, knock, knock. Louder now, more urgent, as if the door itself would burst apart. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it an endless whisper. Open the door. It is time. He shouted into the storm. Who's there? No answer, only the relentless knocking and the roar of the wind. The rancher raised his gun and stepped toward the door, each stride pounding against his chest like a hammer. When his hand touched the icy doorknob, his heart nearly stopped. And then he opened it. Before him, bathed in blood-red moonlight, 5 figures stood in a row, cloaked in black. Their hoods hid their faces, revealing only eyes that burned like embers in the night. The one in the center spoke, voice rasping and chilling. We have returned, just as promised. 5 figures in black cloaks stood waiting on the porch. The desert wind hissed through the crack of the open door. The open door, carrying dust and an icy chill. Inside, the oil lamp shook violently, casting long, warped shadows of the 5 cloaked figures. The rancher staggered back a step, gun still raised, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He swallowed hard, his throat raw and dry. Who are you? What do you want from me? No one answered at first. They stood silent, only the sound of their cloaks whipping in the wind, 5 soulless silhouettes. Then, the one in the middle slowly lifted her head. The crimson moonlight revealed a pale face, lips tinted violet, and eyes as deep as an endless pit. It was the face of a widow, but the grief in those eyes had twisted into something else, cold, void, as though it belonged to another world. We are the widows you once saw, her voice rasped, chilling yet sharp, and tonight no one can deny the truth. The rancher froze. Memories flooded back. The nights he had seen them standing motionless in the fields, only to vanish when he drew near. He had told the villagers, only to be mocked, branded a madman. But now, they were here, flesh and blood before his eyes. Another figure stepped forward, bony hand pulling back her hood. Another widow's face appeared, eyes drowning in sorrow, yet burning with a gaze that seemed to sear into him. You have seen us all along. But no one believed, she whispered. Now, the truth itself has come knocking. All 5 raised their faces in unison, eyes blazing crimson in the night. The wind tore through the cracks of the wooden walls, carrying with it a ghastly chorus, like the cries of 100 lost souls. And in that instant, the rancher understood. Tonight, there would be no way back. They said, tonight the truth will be revealed, and you are the witness. The wooden cabin seemed to shrink in on itself as the 5 widows stepped inside, uninvited, unafraid of the trembling gun in the rancher's hands. The door slammed shut behind them with a heavy thud, as if sealing off his only escape. The oil lamp flared, then flickered weakly, throwing sickly yellow light across their pale faces. The 4 walls shuddered faintly, as though even the old house itself trembled before these midnight visitors. The widow in the center fixed her gaze on the rancher, her voice rising, half whisper, half echo that filled every corner of the room. Tonight, all truth will be laid bare, and you will bear witness to it. The rancher gripped his gun tighter, shouting hoarsely, What do you want from me? Another widow stepped forward, her eyes glowing with a crimson gleam, lips curling into a shadowed smile. We want nothing, except to show them all that you never lied. The words pierced him like a blade of ice driven straight into his chest. His whole body trembled. In an instant, the memories returned. him standing in the marketplace, crying out about them, the women who appeared and vanished into the night. No one believed. They mocked him, cursed him, cast him aside. And now here they were, undeniably real, standing before his eyes. Outside, the wind shrieked and the windows rattled in their frames. Villagers began gathering in the yard, whispering to one another, their faces pale with terror, as they glimpsed the 5 widows through the cabin's dim light. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering with a quiver, "Mama, it's true. They're real." In the rancher's eyes, fear flickered, but mingled with it was a strange, twisted glimmer of relief. He murmured, barely more than breath, "At last, they believe me." The villagers panicked as the ghosts of war returned. The strange knocking and whispers carried by the wind could no longer be hidden. Within minutes, the dim glow of the wooden cabin's lamp had become the center of the entire village's attention. Groups of villagers hurried over, clutching lanterns and torches. They crowded around the broken fence, eyes wide with fear tangled with morbid curiosity. Faces that once laughed and mocked the rancher now looked pale as wax. An old cowboy, trembling, pointed at the window. "Good Lord, do you see that? Someone's standing in there." Through the dust-streaked glass, the sickly yellow glow of the oil lamp revealed 5 cloaked figures in black. They stood in a circle around the rancher, unmoving, like statues draped in mourning. A widow in the crowd suddenly screamed, "It's them! It's really them! The ones buried long ago! They've come back!" The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shrieked witches, others muttered frantic prayers. A few bold men drew their guns, but their hands shook too badly to fire. Inside, the rancher turned toward the window, seeing the entire village pressed together outside. His chest tightened with a cruel mix of bitterness and cold dread. For years, they branded him mad, and now they trembled as if he were living proof of the unholy. Then the whisper rose again, chilling, as though 100 women's voices spoke at once through the wind. "Prove it. Let them all see." The crowd broke into panic. Some dropped to their knees in the mud, clutching their heads and wailing. And at that moment, the widow in the center slowly turned her head, staring straight through the glass at the villagers. Her eyes burned like live embers. The crowd froze in silence. No one dared breathe. The widows told their tragedy, and no one dared to breathe. The widow in the center slowly pulled back her hood. Torchlight from outside spilled in, revealing a hollowed face, sunken cheeks, and skin ashen gray, as if the desert itself had drained the life from her. Her voice rose, low, hoarse, each word dragged like a blade across the heart. "We were once wives who waited for our husbands to return from war." Outside, the crowd fell silent. No one moved. Even the desert wind seemed to vanish, yielding to the heavy echo of her grief within the wooden cabin. Another widow stepped forward, eyes glinting with searing hatred. "We waited, but no one came back. Their bodies were left on the battlefield while we remained, cursed, forgotten." A third lifted her hood, revealing a long scar carved across her cheek. Her voice trembled, breaking between a sob and a bitter laugh. "They called us omens, drove us out, locked us away, and on the night we died, not a single candle was lit to bid us farewell." The rancher held his breath, eyes wide, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. In that moment, he understood. They were not only phantoms, but living memories of injustice, women abandoned to suffer in a merciless world. The first widow's voice thundered again, sharp and merciless, cutting into the marrow of every listener. "We have returned, not to beg forgiveness, but to remind this world the women buried in silence have voices too, and tonight all will hear them." A cold wind surged through, making the oil lamp flare wildly. The shadows of the 5 widows stretched long across the walls, flickering like spirits crawling out from the depths of hell. Outside, the crowd shuddered. Many broke down, weeping, crying out the names of dead husbands as if to summon their souls back. The rancher staggered a step backward. His eyes gleamed with terror, but also with something else, the grim certainty that he was about to witness what no human heart was meant to endure. The dead's vow of vengeance, left the rancher breathless. The room grew heavier with every word they spoke. They were no longer merely 5 cloaked figures. They loomed like mountains of wrath crashing down upon the rancher. The scarred widow stepped closer, each footfall landing like a weight upon his chest. Her voice rasped, hoarse yet unyielding. The day our husbands fell on the battlefield was the day we too died. But we were not allowed to rest. We were betrayed, abandoned, branded as curses. And in that moment, we swore, if no one delivered justice for us, then we would claim it ourselves. The second widow pushed back her hood, her long hair tangled, dry as if scorched by decades of desert winds. She locked her blazing eyes on the rancher. Oh, they took our husbands. They took our homes, our land, and us. They cast into the shadows. Tonight we return, not to beg, but to reclaim every drop of blood that was stolen. Outside, panic erupted. Someone screamed, "They're vengeful spirits. They've come to destroy us." The crowd broke apart in terror. Some fled, others fell to their knees in prayer. But none dared cross the fence to intervene. Inside, the rancher stood frozen. His breath came in ragged gasps, his hand gripping the gun so hard his knuckles split and bled. He understood then, they had not come merely to prove their existence. They sought a living vessel, someone to carry out their vow of vengeance. The widow in the center stepped forward, her voice booming like thunder. "And you, rancher, you are the one chosen to fulfill that vow." Her eyes locked into his, searing into his very mind. The cabin drowned in a dreadful silence, broken only by the pounding of the rancher's heart, beating in rhythm with the howling wind outside, like the cries of countless lost souls. A mysterious offer: accept or forfeit your soul. The air froze after the widow spoke. "You are the one chosen." The rancher could hardly breathe. The gun in his hand weighed like useless iron. The central widow stepped closer. Her face was etched with knife-deep wrinkles, her crimson eyes piercing into him. She raised a skeletal hand, her cold, bony finger pointing straight at his chest. "You will deliver justice for us. You will be the voice we were never given. In return, you will not die alone in this desert." The rancher swallowed hard, stumbling back a step. "Why me? I have nothing. I'm just a forsaken survivor." The second widow let out a thin laugh, grating against the wooden walls like metal claws. "Precisely because you have nothing. You are the only one who can bear everything." Outside, the villagers clung to the windows and cracks in the doorframe, straining to hear. The name rancher echoed through the cabin, and their murmurs rippled. Fear and disbelief tangled together. Maybe he truly isn't mad. Sweat streamed cold down the rancher's face as he gripped the gun tighter. Part of him saw an opportunity. At last, to be vindicated, freed from years of ridicule. Yet another part felt the truth sinking deep. To accept this offer meant stepping into an abyss with no return. The third widow moved forward, tangled hair shrouding her gaunt face. Her whisper slithered like a lullaby, yet heavy as stone. "All you need say is yes, and from this night on, the world will bow to believe you." Suddenly, the oil lamp sputtered out. The cabin was swallowed in suffocating darkness. Only the widow's eyes remained, 5 burning embers floating in the black. The rancher felt the room spin. His heart hammered wildly, but within its frantic beat flickered a strange, dangerous hunger. The hunger to be believed, to be acknowledged, even if the price was his soul. The crowd fell to their knees, but before whom? Out in the ranch yard, the villagers shoved and stumbled over one another. Torches flickered, casting long, writhing shadows across the cracked earth. The air was thick with smoke and with fear. An old cowboy stammered, his voice trembling. "You see it now, don't you? We were wrong. He isn't mad. He was telling the truth." But another man shouted, face ashen, "Don't be fools, those aren't women. They're demons wearing human skin." The words struck like a spark into dry straw. Panic flared. The crowd erupted. Some screamed and wept, others turned to flee. A few drew their guns, aiming them shakily at the cabin, too terrified to pull the trigger. A woman clutched her young son tightly, whispering in despair, "If they truly are widows who died in the war, then why are they still standing there?" Inside, the fiery eyes of the 5 widows gleamed through the dust-smeared glass. Just a single glance froze the crowd in place. Chests tightened, breath locked in their throats, no one able to move. A child's wail pierced the silence, echoing across the prairie night. The cry tangled with the shrieking wind, swelling into a suffocating chorus, like hundreds of lost souls closing in from all sides. The rancher heard it all. The fear, the denial, the desperate prayers clawed into his mind. For years, they had mocked him, branded him insane. Now that the truth stood before them, they trembled and called it evil. The widow in the center let out a low, chilling laugh that filled the cabin. You see now, rancher, even when you speak truth, mankind knows only fear and denial. We do not need their belief, only your choice. The rancher stood paralyzed. His hand quaked, the gun heavier than stone. Outside, the entire village stared in dread. Inside, the 5 widows fixed their eyes upon him, like a flock of black crows waiting for their prey to fall. The door slammed shut, trapping both the living and the dead. A violent gust swept across the prairie, snuffing out the villagers' torches one by one. Darkness collapsed over them, broken only by the wail of the wind and screams of terror. In that chaos, the wooden cabin door slammed shut with such force the beams groaned, dust erupting into the air. The sound cracked like a coffin lid, sealing for good. The crowd outside broke into panic. Several rushed forward to force the door, but the moment their hands touched the knob, it seared like fire, driving them back in horror. An old woman's voice quavered, splintering in fear. No, it's not the house. It's them. They've locked it themselves. Inside, the rancher spun around, staring at the door now sealed, as though it had never opened. His heart hammered wildly, sweat pouring like rain. He raised his gun toward the widows, his voice raw and ragged. What have you done? The central widow stepped forward, her cloak sweeping across the creaking boards. Her eyes blazed, lips moving with words that froze the very air. No one leaves. From this moment, there is only you and us. The oil lamp flared one last time before sputtering into nothingness. The cabin drowned in suffocating black, broken only by the 5 pairs of eyes, glowing faintly, like ghostly embers adrift in the dark. Outside, the villagers stood paralyzed, too afraid to approach. Children shrieked, prayers spilled into the night, their voices twisting with the howling wind. The entire village trembled as they stared at the locked cabin, knowing the rancher was trapped inside with those no longer of this world. In the darkness, the rancher swallowed hard, the gun shaking in his hand. For the first time in his life, he felt it unmistakably. Death stood beside him, and it wore the faces of 5 forgotten women. The scream in the dark made the whole village bleed from their ears. The suffocating black swallowed the cabin whole. Only the howl of wind through the warped planks remained, along with the rancher's ragged, broken breaths. He tried to raise his gun, but his arms shook, weighed down as though made of lead. His heart pounded so loud, it seemed it would rip free from his chest. Then, "Ah!" A scream tore through the dark. It wasn't a single voice, but the twisted harmony of dozens, hundreds, of women shrieking at once. The sound crashed against walls and ceiling, shaking the house to its bones. The rancher collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. His chest felt ripped apart, his eardrums ready to burst. Wind surged through the cracks, carrying with it the stench of cold earth and the metallic tang of dried blood. Within it, whispers circled endlessly, echoing from every corner. You saw us. You knew the truth, but they never believed. Now they will witness. The rancher gritted his teeth, forcing his head up. Before him, the 5 widows' eyes blazed red in the dark. They moved around him in silence, swift and spectral, like shadows adrift. Suddenly, the dark split with a flare. One widow leaned close to his ear, her whisper cold as ice. Tonight, you will scream for all of us. Before he could react, a second scream erupted, louder, longer, shaking the windows until they rattled, splintering the cabin door. Outside, the villagers shrieked in terror. Many fell to the ground, clutching their ears as blood streamed from their nostrils and canals. Inside, the rancher clutched his gun, lips trembling in despair. "Dear God, what are you turning me into?" The rancher stepped out, but he was no longer himself. The screams faded, yet their echoes clung to the air like claws tearing at every chest. Darkness in the cabin turned deathly still. No more wind, no more whispers, only a suffocating silence that crushed every breath. Suddenly, the door swung open. Blood-red moonlight spilled across the threshold, revealing a familiar figure, the rancher. He stepped forward slowly, each footfall heavy, as though treading upon his own soul. But this was not the rancher they had known. His face had drained of life, eyes wide and glowing, flickering like embers in the night. Veins pulsed green-blue beneath his skin, twitching with some unearthly current. Sweat-soaked hair clung to his forehead. His breath came quick and shallow, yet when he spoke, his voice rumbled deep and layered, as if many voices spoke through him. "You did not believe." The crowd staggered back. Many fell to their knees, trembling as though before an enraged god. But now it is too late. He raised his head. His burning gaze swept across the villagers, and each whom his eyes touched felt an icy dagger drive into their spine. Behind him, framed in the cabin's black doorway, the 5 widows stood motionless. They did not cross the threshold, yet their blazing eyes glared out at the village, 5 death lanterns burning in the dark. The prairie held its breath. Only the pounding of terrified hearts remained, carried by the whispering wind. "We have returned, and none shall escape." The entire village knelt, trembling before the burning red eyes. The rancher's blazing gaze swept across every face in the crowd. None dared to move. Every jeer, every mocking word they had hurled at him through the years, now dissolved into boundless terror. The oldest woman in the village, leaning on her cane, looked up at him and burst into tears. "Forgive us. We were wrong. We should never have mocked you." She collapsed into the mud, bowing again and again. Her act was the spark that ignited the powder keg. One by one, the villagers dropped to their knees, hands clasped, eyes squeezed shut, muttering broken prayers. "Spare us. Forgive our sins. We believe now." Cries, sobs, and desperate pleas echoed across the night prairie. The entire village knelt before the rancher, the man they had scorned as a mad, lonely fool only days before. But the rancher stood unmoving. His eyes blazed red, his expression distant, as though led by a power not his own. His voice thundered, hoarse and chilling. "You kneel before me, but you do not kneel before them." He raised a hand, pointing back toward the cabin. All eyes turned. In the doorway's black frame, the 5 widows still stood motionless. Their eyes ignited all at once, casting searing beams into the crowd. A cold wind swept across the yard, snuffing out every torch. Only the mottled crimson moonlight remained. The crowd shuddered, and then, as one, pressed their foreheads to the ground. This time, they did not kneel out of fear for the rancher alone, but in belief. Belief in the return of the widowed shadows. No one dared to breathe. No one dared to look up. Only trembling bodies remained, while the wind howled on, like faint, mocking laughter threading through the dark. He spoke only one sentence, and it haunted them for life. The air thickened, heavy with silence, so still that the clattering of teeth from the terrified villagers rang clear. Dozens knelt in the mud, foreheads pressed into the earth, too afraid to lift their heads. The rancher stood tall, his shadow stretching long beneath the blood-red moon. His eyes blazed, illuminating the trembling faces before him. Each breath he drew carried a chill that seemed to cut through their very skin. Slowly, he raised his trembling arm, pointing toward the villagers. His voice rolled out, low, heavy, layered with 100 voices at once. "Now, do you believe?" The words thundered across the prairie. They did not merely echo in their ears. They carved themselves into the very marrow of their souls, leaving every body shuddering uncontrollably. A child screamed, breaking into sobs. His mother clutched him tightly, eyes brimming red, whispering in despair. We believe now. Please, don't make us prove it any further." Behind the rancher, the 5 widows tilted their heads in eerie unison. Crooked smiles crept across their lips, cold, grim, like scars slashed into the barren earth. Their burning eyes reflected the village's terror. The rancher closed his eyes and let out a long breath. A faint smile flickered across his face, bitter yet satisfied. After years of mockery, at last, he had forced them to bow before the truth. That sentence became the indelible mark of that night, a line no villager dared forget, echoing still in their dreams years later. Now, do you believe? By morning, the rancher was gone, leaving no trace. The moment his final words faded, the desert wind died. No more howling, no sting of sand against the skin. Silence fell absolute, as though the entire prairie itself held its breath. The crowd still knelt, faces pressed to the dirt, none daring to rise. Only a few braver souls risked a glance toward the wooden cabin, and when they did, their hearts nearly stopped. For in that black doorway, the 5 widows were gone. Nothing remained but a hollow darkness, yawning deep and endless, like the mouth of a pit that had swallowed everything whole. No footsteps, no sound, no trace that they had ever been there. A trembling voice broke the silence. Where did they go?" At that, the rancher turned his head toward the house. His eyes, once blazing red, were now vacant, empty. His face was gaunt, skin ashen, as if all life had been drained from him. He murmured, dazed, like one lost in a dream, "They are gone, but they will return when someone dares to forget the truth of this night." With that, the rancher let the gun slip from his hand. The metallic clang rang harsh and final through the night. He walked slowly into the fathomless dark of the cabin, the door shut behind him, untouched by any hand. From that night on, the rancher was never seen again. Yet the villagers whispered, on nights of the blood-red moon, if you stand at the edge of the prairie in silence, you can still hear the echo drifting from the abandoned house. Now, do you believe? The curse spread beyond the prairie. No one dared speak of it. After that night, the village was never the same. Its people lived in endless dread. No one dared speak the rancher's name, nor set foot near the abandoned wooden house. Yet silence could not bury fear. Whenever the desert winds rose strong, whispers of the widows were heard again, drifting from the gaping black void of the shattered windows. Children grew up with fireside warnings. On a blood-red moon, never go outside. Never look toward the abandoned ranch. And never ever say that the rancher lied. Some claimed the curse spread beyond the village. Merchant caravans passing through swore they heard strange knocking at midnight, though no house stood nearby. A few dared to investigate, only to vanish forever, leaving behind nothing but footprints ending in the dust. In time, the legend spread across the Wild West. Those who do not believe the truth will face the 5 widows at midnight. Travelers began leaving offerings, candles, charms, food, at the door of the forsaken house. But by morning, all were gone. In their place, strange words scrawled in dried blood appeared across the rotting walls. We are still here. With each passing generation, the terror grew heavier. The curse stretched far beyond the prairie, becoming a ghost story whispered in every frontier town. And for those who had witnessed that night, one question lingered, festering like a wound that would never heal. If the rancher vanished with them, will he one day return, his eyes burning redder than ever before? From madman, the rancher became a legend across the West. Years passed, and the village slowly withered into ruin. Its people fled, carrying with them a fear carved deep into their bones. Yet the tale of the rancher and the 5 widows did not vanish. It endured, more alive than any mortal soul. They began to whisper new names for him, and the keeper of the curse, and the chosen of the widows, and the man who walked out on the blood moon. The legend spread across the frontier, crossing barren mountain ranges and distant towns. Around campfires, travelers retold it in hushed voices. There was once a man the whole village mocked as mad, but on the final night, when 5 widowed shadows appeared, he became the living proof of a truth no one wished to face. Over time, the story shifted, reshaped by fear. Some swore the rancher was devoured, his soul fused with the widows in the dark. Others claimed they had seen him riding across the desert, eyes blazing red, hunting those who dared to mock the dead. Children in frontier towns grew up under the warning: if you laugh at another's grief, the rancher will come for you at midnight. And the elders added their own grim counsel: if you hear 3 knocks on a blood moon night, never open the door, for what waits outside is no longer human. Thus, the rancher was no longer flesh and bone. He became legend, a figure at once terrifying, tragic, and eternal. A warning carved into the soul of the Wild West, to never scorn the truth nor the pain of the forgotten. And on nights when the wind howls across the prairie, some still swear they hear the whisper slipping through cracked doors. We have returned, and the rancher is still here. On the final blood moon night, the door vanished with fate itself. The prairie stretched endless beneath a crimson moon, its glow deeper, bloodier than ever before. The land was eerily still. No barking dogs, no neighing horses, not even the desert wind dared to stir. At the heart of that silence, the abandoned wooden house still stood, rotting, collapsing, its frame long surrendered to decay, yet none dared approach. All believed it to be the threshold between the living and the dead. The last blood moon began with 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. From the hollow cabin came the sound, dry, steady, echoing across the prairie until every living thing shivered. They said it carried for miles, as if death itself rapped upon every door. The curious gathered at the prairie's edge, but none stepped closer, their eyes fixed on the house. And then, in the blood-red glow, the wooden door creaked open on its own. From the darkness within, a lone figure emerged. The rancher. His tattered coat still clung to him, his faded cowboy hat pulled low. Yet his face was pale as ash, and his eyes blazed like live coals burning holes in the night. Behind him, 5 widows stood in the doorway, motionless. They neither spoke nor moved, but their eyes shone like slashes of fire, searing the darkness, pinning the distant onlookers with their gaze. The rancher halted, raising his head toward the blood-soaked sky. His voice rolled out heavy, tolling like a funeral bell. Tonight, none shall ever doubt again. With that, he turned. He and the 5 widows stepped into the endless shadow of the prairie. The cabin door slammed shut behind them, then dissolved, vanishing into dust as though the house itself had melted back into the earth. From that night forth, the rancher and the widows were never seen again. But the legend lived on, spreading forever like a scar carved into the Wild West. And on rare nights of the blood moon, if you listen closely, you may still hear a whisper drifting from the desert. Now, do you believe?